Good morning. Sunday, September 19th, 2021, here in Sarasota, Florida. My name is Alyson, Noune. This is take one for today. I don't usually intend on the onset of any recording to do multiple takes, but today I am intending to push through my own barriers, to have the courage to let down any and all remaining fear that I have regarding what represents my present moment in this day and age, at this time on this planet. I'm going to intend to set what I think are some underlying assumptions shared, I'm going to say by how do you see? You can't even talk without labels and classifications and groups, because without certain underlying assumptions being made, what I will say will not be understood or received in any way that I'm intending it to be received, in any way, to meet me in the way and the manner and what I'm trying to communicate as I share. Make it simpler, Alyson. Go direct. Simultaneously, I'm in my ego self as Alyson, and the ego has taken some wallops of some hits the past couple of months, really, really big ego hits, really big, at the core big, unprecedented big. Because the last time I really let go of my ego in the way that spirit is asking me to do again, I was excited, ready, eager, and more than willing and ready to let go of the ego that I had carried as Alyson up until my spiritual awakening on November 18th, 2010. I had no trouble letting go the Alyson that I was before that date, because that Alyson was not particularly happy. She certainly wasn't thriving. She quite literally loathed herself to a depth that she didn't even really recognize until she began to spiral her way out of it. So I was very ready to let that ego go. And yes, it was work, but it was nothing compared to what this latest round of my personal cycle has brought to the surface in terms of releasing and letting go who I thought I was up until this point in time. And the Alyson that I had intended and worked to become, the Alyson I set out to become when I had my awakening. I was still young. So I still hadn't accepted really that there is no finish line to this journey. You really don't ever stop the becoming process. So without really fully understanding it, I did have an endpoint in mind, and that sort of I don't want to say it null and voids the journey, not in any way, but that's not an accurate representation of the greater truth with a capital T. The greater truth with a capital T, which goes hand in hand with the underlying assumptions that I'm working to identify in this recording before I proceed to the next recordings, is that there is no finish line to life, not even what we perceive to be that finish line as natural in the death of this body. The death of this body is just that, the death of this body. The essence of you, your spirit, your soul, your being will never be destroyed. It will never die. And that is a really big game changer as an underlying foundational truth. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the characters that we choose. And yes, I do believe that is underlying truth with a capital T or I should say overriding truth, universal truth with a capital T, that's also serving as one of my underlying assumptions for everything that I am working to be right now in my world, is that our souls chose these lives. We chose the vessels that we were going to incarnate into in this particular life. That vessel, inherent in that vessel, are obvious physical advantages or disadvantages, or physical, let's just call them physical realities. Tall, short, male, female, rich, poor. Actually, rich, poor isn't a physical. Rich, poor does get into, though, an aspect for sure, for certain, of what and how we choose and why we choose the particular life combination that this incarnation will be. We choose the physical, and we choose the personality, the energy, the wiring of that physical. And then we choose the setting. You choose at least your starting point setting. And you don't choose a certain starting point setting without an idea of what you're intending. It really is like you're the author of a story, and you have to take your characters on a journey. And by the virtue of the story, unless it's it has a sequel or part of a series, that story has a particular starting and end point for that character. And all this life is one little chapter of our greater life story. So when we make this plan for ourselves, we do have a general idea of a starting point and an ending point. But it's up to the character to choose, what road is going to get to that. And in some cases, one can absolutely make choices that never get to the envisioned endpoint. And the beautiful thing is there's no right or wrong. It's whatever happens is divine and is perfect. So we've got truth with a capital T, number 1. The essence of you can never, ever die. Number 2, that essence chose, and I dare say planned and provided at least an outer framework for this life, and chose you, your personality, your gender, your size, your family, all with reason and intent. Ultimately, for you to simply have the overall task of waking up and remembering that fact, that you did make a plan for this life and you chose it. So you have no one else on the outside to blame. No more victimhood. No more victimhood. We chose this. Even the most horrific situations, we chose it. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying certain life paths aren't a little bit more challenging than others, but rest assured, every path has got its challenges. And the degree to which each human faces those challenges and the angle at which they face those challenges, whether they ever hit them head on or whether if they just flirt with them on the periphery, all of that is a spectrum. All of that exists on a massive spectrum. And it's not for any of us to know, because when you look at somebody else's life and what you think the challenges are and how you think yours is better or harder or worse or whatever, you're still looking at their life through your lens. So that's probably a good number 3, truth with a capital T. Comparison, oh my God. Comparison and judgment are kryptonite. Comparison with others and judgment of yourself or others. It's kryptonite. And if you're unfamiliar with the Superman reference, Superman, one of the most powerful heroes, superheroes that goes back many, many decades in culture, in our cultural influences. Strongest guy, could do everything, fly, all that good superhero stuff, unless he was faced with kryptonite, which completely caused him to lose all of his superhero powers. We are all superheroes. We all ultimately have the same superhuman power, which is to connect directly to Source, to creation, to God, and to co-create with it humbly, to serve as its agent. and with God, creation, divine, source, the multiverse, the cosmos, in your corner and guiding your life, anything, absolutely anything is possible. And there are no limits. That, to me, is definitely the definition of superhero. However, we lose that power. We lose it when we slip into comparison or judgment. And the magnitude to which we've been conditioned to compare and judge is astounding. It's astounding. And it's also, I believe, one of the biggest elephants in the room, because it's not comfortable to speak about it. It's not comfortable to give voice, a louder voice perhaps, to a more public voice. In this case is what I feel, at least in part, I'm being called to do, to share some of my own developments in my own story regarding facing judgment. And whenever you judge somebody else, ultimately it's a judgment you're passing on yourself. And my judgments of myself, gold medal judger I am. So breaking that has been breaking that habit, softening that understanding, and ultimately just being able to be real, call myself out when I'm in judgment, and do the very hard work of facing it, and the very hard work of understanding that anytime you're judging anything on the outside of you, in other humans, you are judging an aspect of yourself. And it's a hell of a lot harder to turn that mirror in on some of these uglier feelings and to go deeper within your own shadow and your own dark aspects. Whether it's triggering stuff from this life or from previous lives. Even the youngest of souls present on this planet at this time, we have all had lives where we're rich, where we're poor, where we've been a man, where we've been a woman, where we've been more quote unquote good, where we've been more quote unquote evil, where we've done deeds that we're proud of, and when we've done deeds that we are not proud of. We all have done this, which is why, to some degree, we all get triggered. And it's not about looking outside of ourselves. It's about, right now, doing unprecedented amounts of work going within. But we've got a world that's conditioned us to go without, to seek everything outside of ourselves. And that too is another very, very challenging momentum to bring into a better balance, to have in check, to acknowledge its influence, and then to acknowledge the greater truth of spirituality, of faith, of the essence of what we are. It's not ever about what's going on outside of us. And the only way we collectively shift to a new mass reality is if we come together as individuals who have already done that within our own lives and created a different reality for our own life. And anything that we sought to fix outside of ourselves, we took that inwards and did that work, and then look to the external. And what I've learned is, once you realize that the journey is all within, and you do the real healing work, you just, I can only speak for my journey. I have wanted and been called to engage less and less in the outside of me, because unless there's agreement, it's a complete waste of energy. And most of the agreements, we go outside, whether it's for work or for social, most of the agreements in place in mass are not agreements that I ever wanted to agree to. I've never understood and never fully agreed to play the reality, 3D reality of the game the way I saw it structured. And that was hard to not align to that reality. But I couldn't agree to play it. I wasn't able to agree to play it. Social contracts, there's lots and lots that surround us with regards to hierarchies and labels and titles and all these nice little groups. And I'm not really interested in engaging, let's put it this way, I only am interested in engaging with humans who know how to identify one another as equal but different. And it takes a really special human to be able to see the value in one another without all those hierarchies and labels and titles and knowing of what their story is, but to feel and to be able to feel their essence and see their best version without needing the assistance of all the false words, the limited words, the words that only give part of the story. This is going all over the place. 16 minutes in. Oh, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's what's so crazy is I don't want to say I don't care, but I can't go into, it was one thing to go into communities of people who just weren't seeing this bigger picture. They're they just weren't seeing the bigger picture. They were still living in the world of where life was understood. You have families, you get a career, you retire, all those things. See, none of that stuff is my life. None of that stuff is my reality. None of that is, and I'm not putting it down. It's just, that's not my reality. And by virtue of that, it had to be vaster. My reality had to include more of that, because when I defined myself according to that reality, all you are is a complete loser. So I had to go higher in the tree. I had to go seeking for more, because that wasn't what my reality was intended to be. That's not what it was. So I had to go further out to define what it was I was doing and pursuing and looking to become in this life. And so once I started consciously on that journey and started my company and began the work of building a life, for lack of a better way of saying it, rooted in a completely different reality, certainly not rooted in the mainstream 3D reality. When I set out on that, that meant that I was now interacting within the 3D reality really just a lot more silently. I wasn't sharing, I wasn't playing the same game. And that was okay, because I had finally learned and matured and understood. I talked so much and shared so much because I wasn't able to self-validate. Now I had this unbelievable ability to self-validate the greatest visions of my world. And so when I went out into the 3D world, I no longer needed to overly talk about all my inner workings of my journey and my greatest dreams and my greatest struggles, and because most were never really understanding that. So I held that back and, kept working silently to build that. I didn't realize I had expectations of what it would feel like or look like. I didn't intend to have any expectations. But when I signed up for this class 2 months ago, which again, I hate describing things in this way, but we're limited to groupings and titles and sort of classifications in order to even begin to talk to one another. So for lack of a better way of saying it, this was a group of awake individuals, people who also, not from that same perspective, but from arguably a bigger perspective of the entire world situation right now, were higher up in the tree. They were seeing more, or at least knowing there was a fucking lot more going on than what we were being shown from the lower branches. So people higher up in the tree. And one, I was naive and immature to believe, and I didn't even realize I believed this, but clearly I believed there was going to be more sort of unification there, and that the spectrum wouldn't be equally as vast on that level of the tree, if you will. There's an equally vast spectrum of people with that greater of awareness. And because you have more awareness and you're including even more in your perceptions and what your definitions are in reality, holy shit, it gets even more bombarding if you're an energy sensitive person, because it's exponentially multiplied. And so one, I was walloped by the spectrum. Wasn't prepared for that. Two, so basically this whole experience has revealed to me beliefs I didn't realize I had, that I clearly had. And now I'm in this holy hell of a place of really coming face to face with all these things and being real and understanding it and seeing it and trying to decide what I still want to hold on to and what I want to let go of. So we got beliefs that I didn't realize I had being revealed to me as a result of joining this class with this huge, 160 plus people that are quote unquote awake, higher in the tree. We got our beliefs being revealed, and we also have some pretty real expectations being revealed that, again, I did not intend to have. I did not realize I had said expectations. And then we've got all the self-reflection that any of this work requires. So what does having this belief, what did going into this with this expectation, feeling this way, being triggered in this way, what is all this saying about me? So it's taken me higher and deeper than I've ever gone. And I wasn't looking for this. I impulsively is probably the better word, joined this class. My first initial instinct was absolutely not. And it was because of the first title of the first word in the title of the course, which is monetize. Absolutely, positively, immediately, my first gut was absolutely not. Nothing that begins with monetize is of my frequency, vibration, desire, nothing. Like I want nothing. I want only to rise above the world of money. I see it so clearly. I feel it. And it's been a frustrating one because it's one that you can play it alone. And that's the tough thing, right? Again, it's never about what's outside of you, but that's a tough one to play by yourself, to play your own game of money and value by yourself, because we're still very much in a world that has agreed collectively in this arbitrary thing we call money, which is just paper. It's actually just zeros and ones. It's all bullshit at its core. It's all bullshit. And I am ready and see and have been living my life as far away as possible from anything that's even, I've taken the boundaries of that word and what it represents as far as I can go in the third dimension. And so my initial reaction was to not take this course. But then something, and you had to make the call in 2 days, which was, to me, that's also, I'm just going to call it out. I don't know, I feel like, and it's not a bad thing. It's just, boy, anytime somebody if you're under the gun, man, that's a wild, when you're under the gun. It's good sometimes to be under the gun to make a decision, but be cautious of making decisions when you're under the gun unless you absolutely have to. Obviously this wasn't a life or death decision, but I had to make the call really quickly, and the call that I made, boy, definitely I was not prepared on any conscious level for where this has taken me. I really, really wasn't, not on any conscious level. So it has really, in many ways, felt like six years of growth jammed into 6 weeks, and I'm not through it. I'm not reconciled. I'm still wobbly. I'm still very wobbly, which is why I haven't shared anything publicly in 4 weeks, which is why this recording will likely just be for me. And I've gone all over the place in this recording, and I've allowed it to go all over the place because there's that many things that I could share. There's that many angles I could come from. There's that many things of, perceptions and sharing and explanations that I know have value. But damn, I can't convince and prove to people what I started to say earlier was, it was one thing to be in the world of people lower in the tree who you knew. They didn't have awareness. They weren't on the same branch as you, so it just did no good to talk about that branch because they definitely would have no clue what you're talking about. But what has walloped me as I got to these higher branches, I sort of made these assumptions. So we got beliefs, expectations, and assumptions that are being revealed to me that I had, that I did not realize I had, or were extending to this experience. I just made the assumption that the convincing and proving would stop when you started to play with the crowd of energy of other awake beings. I thought the convincing and proving would stop. And I didn't think it was possible that that would actually be magnified even more than the areas of convincing and proving that I had already experienced in the third dimension. Places like Microsoft, companies and environments like Iron Man. If you want to talk about convincing and proving, look up what it takes to do an Iron Man and look up what these men and women are able to do with their physical bodies. It's fucking unreal. So you want to talk about convincing and proving energy. I've been around insane environments of convincing and proving energy in the third dimension, and the convincing and proving energy that I was picking up on in this course was blowing that away. And that is a game that I do not want to play. And it threw me on my ass because I didn't even realize to what extent I was still playing it. And I had no idea how I was even going to speak to this life-altering, because this is now life-altering. This is course-altering. I have been stopped dead in my tracks. I have been thinking and releasing all the work of the past 9 years and being prepared to let it go and possibly have none of it directly turn into any product or any piece of work or project or anything. I'm working through the release and letting go of it all, having only just been the experience, which should never be minimized. But in our material world, we've got everything upside down and inside out of what we're valuing and putting the most importance on. So what I'm letting go here and preparing to let go, and it's not to say that I won't use anything from the previous 9 years. This isn't to say that Ripple 2020 still won't be a project that I launch on the 1st of January in 2022. But the journey I had not yet gone on is to release and let go of everything I have become in the past 9 years. And because that was being done for the first time in my life with full and complete awareness and consciousness of me choosing my life, every single choice. I was no longer the victim of my life starting on November 18th, 2010. I'd have glimpses of experiences where I was acting like a victim, but at my core, I was aware and I was able to call that out every time as I worked my way out of the pattern of victimhood, out of the pattern of external, and into the journey within. And I had created a new version of myself. And I've just reached a different level of understanding, a different level of consciousness, a different level of awareness, a different level of experience, a different level of wisdom, a different level just altogether relative to my own life. And that version of me is no longer, it's not who I am. And so I have to let it all go to see what remains, to get back to the essence of what I am, not this external that I build around the essence. I got to get back to the essence again, ground zero point. And when you've been sharing your journey for almost 9 years publicly, that can be kind of a hard thing. It's like actors. If they aren't wise early on in their careers, they can get pigeonholed into typecasted, into certain roles, into certain characters. And when they try to break free from that, the audience just is unable to accept them as anything other than a comedian, or as anything other than, the hopeless romantic rom-com woman or man character. And I have a very strong personality, so I tend to get typecasted in whatever role that I'm in other people's worlds really quickly, 1 or 2 years. That's one of the reasons I didn't last anywhere for more than 2 years. And so what I've typecasted myself in my own role of myself in the past 9 years, I now need to break free from and get back to the core and kind of start again without starting again, if that makes any sense. And it is uncomfortable at its sort of highest frequency and really scary at its lowest frequency, the process. And made more convoluted by the fact that I now have public personalities that directly affected this journey in ways that it's going to be really, really hard for me not to share these aspects of my journey. But then by virtue of that, what do I do with having these names? Because some of my greatest lessons and huge lessons that I almost have to be shared have come at the expense of some of my closest, most intimate relationships. Not that this latest one has been intimate. It's been anything but close and personal. But all to say, I won't ever use direct names, but connecting the dots is, sometimes not so hard. Going off on another tangent. I need to conclude this. Listen to it later. It's only for me. It's only for me because this is part of the old persona. You're still not doing it. You're still over intellectualizing. You got to get more direct and more succinct. You did a recording on Mark, Mel, and Roseanne. Now Mark puts a call out for Mel's show. It's just unbelievable, and it's not about the ego for me, and I will not convince or prove, but I also will not deny what I've already had in place and what I think I have the capability to do. But I'm not going to dance around you like a fucking monkey trying to get you to see me or believe that I could possibly be equally of value as you are out in the world. I'm not doing it. So we'll see what that means.